Hello and welcome to the Climbing Daily Friday Gear Show. I'm not in the studio and I've got a guest here on the sofa with us. This is Tom Randall, crack climbing maestro, lattice guru, all-round climbing guy.
Something.
I don't. Today we're going to be talking about trad gear in crack climbing. And a little bit of context, so we're here at the Boardroom Climbing Wall just outside of Chester and we've been filming all weekend. This show I think is coming out before a lot of the stuff we've already filmed.
Okay, yeah.
So I won't give away too much. But we've been hanging off Seco blocks, we've been getting stuck into cracks, loads of stuff coming soon.
It's been fun.
It's been good, man. You do this crack school thing. For people who want to sign up, this is like the wide boys, so you and Pete, and you're teaching crack climbing, right?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning a bit more about crack climbing and the techniques really, so it's very much a technique-based class, we're running a series of them in the UK this early 2018. I think we've got about another 6 or 7 different venues that we're doing, and all you have to do is go onto the website for the walls. There'll be posts, I guess, at the bottom of this
I'll stick the
video.
link in a copy. Yeah.
Really, you can just Google it, and then you'll find all the locations you can do it, and it's just a 90-minute session on our crack volumes. We teach you how to tape up and use all the different techniques. It's pretty good fun.
So get involved. But this is the gear show, so we're going to talk about gear, and we've got a bunch of shiny wild country stuff hanging there. So I asked you to specifically sort of think about crack climbing. So you're looking at a crack. What's the first thing that goes in your harness in terms of rack for a normal sort of like hand jam, for example? Okay,
so number one thing is that when you're in a crack, obviously the place-to-place protection is going to be in the place where it feels easiest, and that in nearly all cases is going to be where you're going to bomb a hand jam. So I'll go straight down to my rack first of all, and I'll pick things off my harness which are essentially the exact size of your hand. So this blue friend here, if I pull that back down to kind of perfect jamming or perfect size to go in the crack, is I can just measure that up against my hand, and I can slip my thumb in there, same size there. So in a rest position, when I'm in that good jam, invariably I'm going to have that placement really close to it.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense to, so for example, this size of friend is just truly awful.
Okay.
I very rarely will pick this one up and use it on my crack.
Is that because it's too big for a finger jam but too wide for a hand?
Yeah, it's slightly bigger than fingers.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a hand jamming size, not even thin hands.
Yeah.
So this tends to be my last option to put on the harness.
Okay.
Unless I know the crack is that size all the way up.
It's interesting what you said about the hand placement for the cam, because something I do when crack climbing all the time is I have this decision to make between handhold and gear placement.
Oh, yeah.
And 9 times out of 10 I'll go gear placement because I'm scared of falling off. But how do you sort of avoid that? If there's an obvious placement for both your hand or both your fingers and a piece of gear, how do you sort of work around that usually?
So if I'm really stuck and it's a proper, I've got to place it here, there is no other option, is, so let's say there's only one hand jamming pod and it's only the size of a hand, but I really want to place this friend here in it. I will place my hand in the perfect hand jam. I'll get this other hand and I'll rest it out as much as possible so I get it really, really fresh. I will take this off my harness.
Yep.
I'll place it in my teeth.
Yeah.
So I'm holding it, it's kind of prepped and ready to go, and then I will move from this hand jam into a worse jam above that's not ideal. So I would have rested this, it'll feel fresh, it's in my teeth, so then as soon as I do that, straight off, in the pod, and go really quickly.
Okay.
So it's like a strategic thing.
Cool, so that's the big cams, and then what else have you got on your rack that you bring up?
So the other stuff is the really big kind of super-sized friends, so stuff like the original Friend 5, and for me the key thing to appreciate about this cam is that actually when you're placing it, it's just as stable when it's very, very open and it's quite tipped out to really closed. And really myself and Pete have only become confident with that stability and the fact it's just as good in a very wide position by essentially practicing by falling off on them and seeing how they hold.
Yeah.
And that's just so important because now I'm covered all the way from that size there right down to this, and it's just as good in all those positions.
And is that only on bigger cams? Is that something that happens on those specifically?
It's on these particularly because they're really wide across the head compared to other cams. So if I took a smaller cam, you can see that, head to head,
Yeah.
it's a much wider unit.
Okay.
So the stability comes through that axis as well. It's closer to being a true square.
Yeah.
So that's why it works well when it's tipped right out on
Okay.
these.
I've heard horror stories about big cams walking more than small cams. Is that something you've got to be aware of when you're placing them?
I think it's like any cam, you've got to be aware of the walking issue. I would say that these friends are pretty okay about not walking because, you know, if you try that there, you'll see the spring mechanism is reasonably tight.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of tension.
Oh, it is, isn't it? A lot more so than something smaller.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
or even some of the other large friends that you'll get in other brands that, although when you first pick it up in the shop, you'll go, oh man, I think this feels quite hard work to pull it back. That becomes your saviour in a very wide tipped out position because it won't move around as much.
Yeah.
And that provides stability, and I'd rather have a piece stay and not rip out than maybe have to pull an extra kilo on the.
No, I'm definitely with you on that. I've just got to explain, if you hear lots of like squeaking doors, we're in this climbing gym and we found a little cubby hole, but the rest of the world is carrying on around us, so sorry if it's noisy. Cool, so big cams, sorted.
Yeah.
How many of those do you take up? I mean, obviously dependent on the route, I suppose. You make a decision when you're on the ground, and because you don't want to be hauling up more than you have to.
No. It would probably work out as something like one piece per 10 foot of the length of the route if you really think you know what you're doing.
Okay.
Whereas maybe it would work out one piece per 6 if you had no idea on sizes. Because you would end up obviously finishing the route with 4 or 5 pieces maybe left on your harness.
Yeah.
Other than situations like when I was with you in Fairhead and I completely ran out because
you
I
did.
didn't have anything left.
So Tom, what was your first Fairhead climbing experience like?
It was a little bit light on rack.
So cams, that's kind of cams, nuts?
Yeah, so on the nuts front is, we use a lot of these.
We should perhaps mention that you're a wild country athlete, so obviously all this gear is wild country gear.
Yeah.
Other gear is available.
I think one of the things that people should probably always know about me, I'll only actually really sing the praises of something which I think is really blooming good.
Yeah.
The reality is with these nuts is I probably place these super light rocks, which are just a single stem and offset in 2 different angles. I use these, I don't know, 90+% of placements now. I barely use the normal rocks because I think these hold and fit more crack placements or general natural protection placements way more than anything else.
They are a totally different size, like shape to a normal nut that I'd know.
What you find with them is that because this stem here is centrally placed, is that when you place it in the crack this way or that way, it feels just as even and just as balanced and stable. Whereas with a 2-wire nut, there's one way in which you place it where you go, yeah, okay, that's really good. I'm quite happy with that. And another angle at which it's okay, but in my mind, I never feel quite as confident.
Yeah.
And this just takes that element away.
Is there a disadvantage to super lights over a normal nut, do you think?
I think the real disadvantage that you could say there was that one, they're a bit harder to get out of the crack. These don't respond so well to having it jammed in and getting the carabiner, and you know how you just yank it upside down and it rips out.
Yeah.
These don't respond so well to that, so these need a little bit more of a tap with the tool to come underneath. And secondly is because if your seconder isn't so aware of how these nuts work, is they will do that yanking thing, and it'll create a point here eventually where if you just backwards and forwards on that wire for years, it'll wear through faster than a traditional rock.
Do you ever take bigger nuts up routes, or do you stick with cams if it gets that big?
I've kind of gone down the route where I use friends now more, on probably that size upwards, so a touch bigger than that.
Okay. And extending, because this is something we get asked a lot, is when should I extend gear? Why should I extend gear? Perhaps just give, use your trad expert knowledge to tell us why should you extend gear?
Well, the number one reason for me for extending gear is that, one, if I need to place the crack deeper, or rather place the friend deeper in the crack, and I want the carabiner to still sit on the outside of the crack, then of course I need to take that carabiner off, put it through one side, and then I can extend it out. Yeah. So then the carabiner's still on the outside of the crack. Yeah. And that being because if the carabiner ends up inside the crack, and you're going to fall off or weight the rope, because you end up them rubbing over the edges of the crack, and it just wears your throat more. You're more likely to end up with a gate opening situation as well.
Okay, yeah.
So it's good to avoid that. And then secondly is on placements that are very open, and of course we're increasing our chance of the friend walking, then having this extender right out and reducing the amount of friction you're getting through the rope, it means it's less likely to pick it up and walk that stem up.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Cool. Well, Tom, thanks for taking us through that. Really appreciate it. If we sell it in the shop, the links will be in the copy below. Obviously, some stuff here we don't, so it won't be. Thank you very much, Tom.
No problem.
Sign up to the Crack School. I did it the other day and it's awesome.
Cool. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.